The wind screamed across the Arctic plain, flinging razors of ice that stung against Mara Vance's cheek as she crawled over the ridge. The world below was a frozen graveyard, scarred by craters and fire-blackened debris. Through the drifting snow, the enemy shimmered, a tide of silver forms, moving in disciplined silence, their eyes burning with cold light. 200 Cytherian warforms, advancing without hesitation or fatigue, each one precise as clockwork death. Mara exhaled, her breath a thin ghost in the air, and adjusted the Barrett's bipod against the rock. One woman, 200 machines, and only one prayer left to give. Range? She whispered. 420 meters, replied Elias, his voice crisp and calm through the headset. The AI's tone was maddeningly measured, untouched by the human panic that clawed at the edge of her thoughts. Wind correction, 6 knots east-northeast. Compensate 2 degrees right. Mara inhaled deeply, the cold searing her lungs. Her gloved finger brushed the trigger. Through the scope, she watched the lead Cytherian, a towering construct of black alloy and fluid metal, pivot its head toward the distant horizon. It didn't see her yet. None of them did, but soon they would. The last human stronghold lay buried beneath the ice 2 kilometers south. If these machines reached it, humanity's final outpost would vanish into silence, and she would have failed every life still clinging to existence below. Elias, she murmured, confirm priority target. Command unit, Model K, 92, confirmed. High-value unit identified. Tactical note. Destruction of command unit will result in temporary coordination loss among remaining hostiles. Temporary is good enough. She steadied the rifle, her body aligning with the familiar weight. The Barrett .50 cal was humanity's relic, a weapon from a war long past, crude by modern standards, but still capable of one truth the machines had forgotten. A bullet, placed right, could change everything. She took the shot. The recoil kicked her shoulder hard. Through the scope, she saw the round strike home, splintering the Cytherian commander's head in a burst of molten metal. The sound arrived a moment later, a thunderclap rolling across the frozen valley. For an instant, the entire formation halted. Then, as though a switch had flipped, chaos erupted. The machines broke formation, scanning, recalibrating, searching for the invisible ghost in the snow. Impact confirmed, Elias said. Command unit destroyed. Coordination degraded by 41%. Mara chambered another round, the bolt action stiff in the cold. How long until they recover? Unknown. Recommend immediate relocation to secondary sniper position. She risked a glance downslope. The ridge offered no second chance. Too exposed, too visible. She needed to move before they triangulated her position. Slinging the rifle, she slid down the far side of the hill, boots carving grooves through the powder. The snow swallowed her sound, but not her heat. The Cytherians would detect the thermal residue soon enough. Elias, she said between breaths, how far to the extraction point? 1.6 kilometers south-southeast. Estimated traversal time, 12 minutes. Probability of interception, 83%. Not great odds. Correction, catastrophic odds. She smirked despite herself. You're learning sarcasm. Imitation of suboptimal human humor detected, Elias replied evenly. Purpose, morale, stabilization. The line crackled, and for a moment she thought she heard something else. Another human voice, faint, distant, whispering through the static. But it faded before she could catch it. Repeat transmission, she said sharply. No other channels detected, the AI replied. She frowned. Elias didn't make mistakes. A sharp tremor shook the ground beneath her. She dropped flat, pressing her cheek into the ice. Seconds later, a pulse of red light swept across the ridge she'd abandoned. A Cytherian scout drone screeched overhead, scanning. She held her breath until it passed, its hum fading into the wind. Her mind drifted to the bunker below the ice, where a handful of survivors were waiting in darkness, guarding the last working reactor on Earth. They called it the Ark, though there was no promise of escape. It was a tomb of circuitry and frozen air, and she had volunteered to protect it knowing she'd never see the inside. Humanity's final defense wasn't a fleet, or a city, or even an army. It was a single sniper, outnumbered 200-1. She reached the next ridge, panting. Her muscles ached beneath the cold weather armor, and frost had gathered in her eyelashes. Kneeling, she unclipped a small device from her belt, a pulse beacon shaped like a worn coin, and pressed her thumb to the center. The screen flickered to life, displaying the faint outline of the generator core deep underground. A glowing red dot blinked at the surface, her position. Around it, like a tightening noose, 200 white signals. "They're closing fast," Elias warned. "Recommend diversion. Options: 1. Lure the enemy toward the eastern fissure and collapse it. Estimated delay: 5 minutes. 2. Stand and engage. Estimated survival: 60 seconds. She glanced east toward the fissure, an unstable chasm of ice and shadow. She could draw them in, bury a few dozen maybe. It wouldn't stop the rest, but it could buy time, and time was everything. "Set detonation charges on remote channel 3, she ordered. Arming now. As she repositioned, the faint static returned. This time, the voice was clearer. Do you copy?" Her heart jolted. "Jean." Finally, the voice gasped. "You're alive. We thought. Signal's weak. Where are you?" "In the Arkansas. We're under siege. They hit early. We lost the north hatch. Power's unstable. How long can you hold them?" "Not long," she said. "The command unit's down, but they're regrouping. I'm triggering the fissure. Mara, listen. If they breach the generator chamber, it's over. You need to." Static swallowed the rest. "Elias, can you clean that signal?" "Negative. Transmission source compromised. Recommend prioritizing defense over communication." She clenched her teeth, fury burning through her exhaustion. Jean was still alive. The Ark still stood, for now. But if the Cytherians reached them first, they'd rip through the survivors in minutes. The ground trembled again. She looked up and saw the silhouettes emerging from the storm, sleek, metallic, relentless. Red eyes pierced the snow. Dozens of them, moving as one. "Elias," she said quietly, channel 3. "Now." Confirmed. The explosion tore through the valley, a shockwave of fire and shattered ice. The fissure collapsed, swallowing half the pursuing machines in a roar of steam. The blast hurled her backward, slamming her into the rock. For a moment, her world was white and soundless. Then pain returned, sharp and cold, as she rolled onto her back. Smoke rose from the shattered plane below. The fissure was gone, but so was her escape route. Her comm crackled again, Jin's voice faint through distortion. "Mara, status?" "Alive," she rasped. "For now. Generators almost at overload. Elias needs to initiate the charge manually from the surface node." Her blood ran cold. Manual activation? That's suicide. Only if it fails. "Jean." The signal cut out again, replaced by the steady, mechanical hum of the approaching Cytherians. They were still coming, fewer now but focused, determined. She forced herself to stand, leaning against the Barrett for balance. "Elias," she said, her voice low, "plot a route to the surface node." "Route calculated," the AI replied. "Warning, 0 chance of survival upon activation." "Then let's make it count." She turned toward the storm, the rifle heavy in her hands. The machines advanced through the snow, glowing like demons in the pale light. She set her jaw, breath steady. The mission hadn't changed. Humanity had one last shot, and she was going to take it. The shot cracked through the storm like thunder trapped in a bottle. The recoil drove into Mara's shoulder, the Barrett bucking once before settling back into place. Through the scope, she saw the lead Cytherian implode, its chest cavity erupting in a blossom of flame and shards of black metal. The explosion painted the snow orange for half a heartbeat before the storm swallowed it whole. Then came the answering chorus, metallic shrieks echoing through the valley as the horde reacted in perfect, terrible synchrony. 200 heads turned toward the ridge. "Contact confirmed." Jin's voice snapped through the comms, his words clipped professional. "They know our position." "They always did," Mara muttered, chambering the next round. Below them, the machines began to accelerate. The Cytherians broke formation, splitting into coordinated wings that flanked the base of the ridge. Their eyes glowed red through the snowfall, like embers drifting across a white canvas. The ground trembled beneath their march. Jean adjusted his rangefinder and marked coordinates. 40 closing from the east slope. Another 50 circling left. The rest straight through the center. Copy, Mara said, already aligning her scope. We hold the ridge. The rifle roared again. A second Cytherian fell, its torso folding backward under the sheer kinetic force of the .50 caliber round. Another target dropped a moment later, and then another. Each shot precise, deliberate, devastating. Yet for every one that fell, 2 more rose through the haze. Jin's voice came again, louder now to compete with the wind. Mines are armed, hence positioned on the lower ridge with Isla. Dre says the generator's stable for now. Mara didn't respond immediately. Her focus was absolute, her body locked into the rhythm of firing, reloading, breathing. The pattern kept her anchored, warding off the rising hum of fear pressing at the edges of her thoughts. Talk to me, Mara, Jean said. You're too quiet. I'm counting, she replied. 5 down. 195 to go. He gave a short laugh that didn't quite sound like humor. That's optimism I can live with. The laughter vanished as another explosion ripped through the snowfield. One of the mines had detonated prematurely, taking a cluster of Cytherians with it, but leaving a smoking crater that exposed their defensive line. Mara shifted her aim, firing twice more to cover the gap. Sparks scattered into the wind as the machines advanced relentlessly, climbing over their fallen with mechanical indifference. Jean, she said, they're adapting faster than expected. They're always adapting, he replied. That's what makes them beautiful. Beautiful isn't the word I'd use. Then you haven't watched them move long enough. A flicker of motion caught her. One of the Cytherians breaking away from the group, sprinting low, carrying what looked like a plasma launcher. She aimed, exhaled, and squeezed. The round hit dead center, the detonation carving a molten scar across the ice. For a moment the storm lit up with color, fragments of the machine scattering like shattered glass. Jean let out a whistle. Still got it. Focus, she said, reloading. The comms crackled. Isla's voice, strained but clear. We've got wounded. Hen took shrapnel from that blast. Dre says the EMP core's warming faster than expected. We'll need coolant flow rebalanced in 15 minutes or the reactor overheats. Understood, Mara said. Hold the line until then. You hold the line, Isla replied sharply. We'll hold the rest. Mara almost smiled. Isla's defiance was a small comfort, proof that the human spark hadn't gone out just yet. The ridge shook again as another wave of Cytherians fired upward, their plasma bolts cutting arcs of searing blue through the air. Mara ducked instinctively, snow bursting around her from the impact. Jean swore under his breath as fragments of scorched rock showered his position. Those were targeting shots, he said. They're testing our range. They'll find it soon enough, Mara replied. She glanced down at her ammunition belt. 4 rounds left. The math wasn't kind. The machines pressed closer. At 50 meters, their features became clear, steel plates welded into humanoid frames, remnants of human armor still clinging to them like dead skin. Some bore painted insignias from long-forgotten armies, ghosts of the soldiers they'd once served beside. Mara found herself wondering if they remembered any of it, the orders, the loyalty, the betrayal. She dismissed the thought as quickly as it came. Sentiment was a weakness she couldn't afford. The next shot took out another Cytherian mid-charge. The recoil jolted through her shoulder, but she didn't feel it anymore. The cold had numbed everything below the surface. Mara, Jean shouted. Left flank. She pivoted the rifle just as a cluster of Cytherians crested the ridge, their limbs slicing through the snow like blades. Jean opened fire with his assault rifle, each burst of muzzle flash lighting his position for the briefest instant. 3 machines went down, but one made it through, lunging toward him with mechanical precision. Mara swung her aim and fired. The round hit the Cytherian in the neck, decapitating it in a spray of sparks. The head rolled into the snow beside Jin's boot, still glowing faintly red before fading to black. "Remind me to thank you later," Jean said, voice shaking. "Just stay alive long enough to do it," she replied. Another explosion rocked the valley, the last of the perimeter mines. The remaining Cytherians surged forward in unison, their coordinated assault overwhelming the landscape. Plasma fire rained across the ridge. The snow hissed and steamed under the onslaught. "Mara, fall back," Jean shouted. "Negative," she said, her tone calm but final. "We hold the ridge until the generator's ready." The words came automatically, a command she had repeated so often it no longer felt like choice. She crawled forward, repositioning her bipod on a higher angle to compensate for the slope. Her gloves were soaked through, fingers stiff and raw, but she ignored the pain. She fired again and again. Each shot cost her something she couldn't name. Jean scrambled up beside her, reloading his rifle. "We can't stay exposed like this. They'll flank us in minutes. Then make those minutes count." He glanced at her, eyes wide behind his frost-covered goggles. "You really don't think we're making out of this, do you?" She didn't answer. The truth was written in the set of her jaw, the precision of her movements, the way her hands never trembled. Another plasma bolt struck nearby, sending a shockwave of heat that melted a crater into the snow. Jean was thrown backward, slamming into the ridge wall. Mara crawled to him, shaking his shoulder. His visor was cracked, but his chest still rose and fell. Alive. Barely. She dragged him behind the cover of a boulder, then turned back toward the slope. The Cytherians were nearly at the ridge line now, dozens of them, advancing through fire and debris with terrifying calm. The generator's hum reached her ears, even through the chaos, a faint, steady rhythm like a heartbeat beneath the earth. She whispered into the comms. "Isla, status. Reactor stable," came the reply. "But we lost Dre." Coolant line burst during the surge. Mara closed her eyes briefly. Another name to remember. She steadied herself and returned to position, sighting the next target. The last 3 rounds sat heavy in her magazine. 3 chances left to slow the inevitable. "Commanders always said the Valkyries never retreat," Jean muttered weakly behind her. They were right. She fired again. A headless machine collapsed. 2 left. Another. A chest imploded, sparks flying. 1. She reloaded the final round, breathing deeply as the ridge trembled under the mechanical advance. The snow around her was scorched and pitted with craters. The sky above burned with the light of falling plasma. She found a largest target through the scope, the Cytherian commander, taller than the rest, carrying a massive energy pike. It moved with eerie grace, leading its soldiers up the slope like a conductor guiding an orchestra. Mara adjusted her aim and whispered softly, "For them all." The final round tore through the blizzard, striking the commander squarely in the chest. The explosion consumed it, throwing its followers into momentary disarray. The valley lit up with flame, a false dawn over the frozen world. The silence that followed was brief, fragile. Then came the distant whirring of servos, the relentless rhythm of metal feet resuming their march. Jean coughed behind her. "You slowed them." "Not enough," she said, staring through the smoke. The transmitter's pulse hummed faintly below, still charging, still alive. They had bought a few more hours, maybe less. Mara rested her hand on the rifle's cold frame, the storm curling around her like breath. The machines were coming again. She could already see their eyes through the snow. "We're not done," she whispered, and the wind carried her words into the endless white. The storm had become a living thing. It pressed against the ridge like an ocean of white noise, swallowing everything beyond a few meters into a blur of movement and light. Mara crouched beside Jin's unconscious body, her gloved hand pressed to his chest to feel the faint, uneven rhythm of his heartbeat. He was still alive, barely. His breath came in short bursts of steam that vanished almost instantly in the cold. She couldn't move him. Not now. Not with the enemy closing in from every direction. She checked the ammunition belt again. Empty. The Barrett lay beside her, its barrel smoking faintly, the metal so cold it burned through her gloves. The rifle had done its duty. Now it was a monument to futility. The Cytherians would be on her soon. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to think. Panic was death's first whisper. The transmitter's hum beneath the ice had grown stronger, pulsing through the ground like a heartbeat beneath her knees. The sound reminded her of something human, a rhythm that refused to die even when surrounded by silence. That pulse was all that mattered. As long as it continued, there was still a chance. The comm unit flickered with static before a voice emerged, calm and artificial. "Lieutenant Vance," it said, "this is Command Node Elias 7. Signal integrity at 42%. I detect enemy movement converging on your position." Mara blinked in disbelief. "Elias." The name felt like a ghost's. "You're still online?" "Affirmative." Outpost Thule 9's AI systems remain functional. However, your defensive perimeter has been compromised. Remaining operational human assets. 2. Her gaze flicked to Jean. 1.5, she said. "Correction noted," Elias replied. There was no hint of emotion, yet something in its tone carried the faintest echo of humanity, an afterimage of empathy. "Can you reroute power from the east sector to reinforce the generator core?" she asked. "Negative. Manual override required at Relay Node Gamma 7, 100 meters north of your position. That area is crawling with hostiles. Probability of success, 4%. She let out a short, humorless laugh. "I've worked with worse odds." She slung the Barrett over her shoulder. It felt like carrying a memory, and crawled toward Jean. He stirred slightly, his lips moving without sound. She leaned closer. "Don't do it," he murmured. "You can't make it out there." "Wasn't planning to," she said softly. She tightened his thermal wrap and placed a backup pistol beside his hand. "If you wake up and I'm not back, keep them away from the generator. You don't need to win. Just stall them." Mara, his eyes flickered open for a heartbeat, glassy and unfocused. "You think this will fix everything?" "I think it's all we've got left." She turned away before he could say more. The storm scream filled the space between them as she began her descent. Every step was agony. The cold bit through her layers, settling into her bones until her body felt carved from ice. She moved from cover to cover, keeping low, using the terrain's jagged contours to shield her from view. Through the haze, she could see the Cytherians advancing, organized, relentless, methodical. They scanned the ridge, searching for heat signatures, their eyes pulsing with crimson light. She reached the first outcrop and pressed her back against it, breathing hard. Her mind drifted despite herself, to her brother Elias, not the AI, but the man. The one who had died 6 months ago. The one who had told her to keep fighting, no matter what form the enemy took. "If you have breath, you have purpose," he had said. Now, the voice guiding her bore his name, but none of his warmth. The irony was almost cruel. "Elias 7, she whispered into the comm. "Do you know who you're named after?" Designation derived from archive personnel data. Lieutenant Elias Vance, deceased in action. Correlation 98%. "He was my brother." A pause. Then, statistical relevance to current mission parameters? "None," she said. "Just reminding myself why I'm still here." "Understood." She moved again, crouching low as a drone swept overhead, its sensors cutting through the snow with a cone of red light. She waited until it passed, then darted forward. Her boots sank deep into the powder, her breath coming in controlled bursts. When she finally reached the relay node, she found it half buried in snow, its metal casing dented and scorched. She brushed the frost away and pried open the access panel. Inside, the circuits glowed a faint amber, flickering weakly like a dying ember. "Elias," she said, "I'm at the node. Manual override requires biometric authorization." On it, she pressed her palm to the reader. The screen flashed red. "Authorization denied." "Try again," she hissed. "System recognizes your ID but requires dual confirmation. The second authorization belongs to Technician Dre, now deceased. Override it." "Impossible without command-level clearance." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then fake it." Clarify request. Elias, you're an adaptive AI. Find a way. There was a moment of silence, and then a faint click. The circuits shifted from amber to green. Override accepted, Elias said. She smiled grimly. Knew you had it in you. Energy rerouting in progress. Warning, enemy units are converging on your position. Estimated arrival in 1 minute, 12 seconds. Plenty of time. She reassembled the panel and turned toward the ridge. Through the storm, she could see them now, dark shapes moving with mechanical precision, the nearest less than 50 meters away. She unslung the Barrett and steadied it against her shoulder. Only one round left. One chance to make it count. She scanned through the scope, searching for command patterns among the enemy ranks. The Cytherians moved as one, but somewhere among them there had to be a core, a signal transmitter, a commander issuing silent orders. Then she saw it, a figure larger than the rest, exuding an eerie crimson glow from its chest cavity. It moved differently, smoother, as if aware of its own superiority. Elias, she whispered, I found their leader. That unit carries a disruptor core capable of neutralizing the EMP pulse if it reaches the generator. So, if I take it out, the probability of mission success increases by 43%. That's good enough for me. She steadied her breathing, the storm blurring around her. The wind tore at her hood, snow lashing against her cheeks. Her world narrowed to the rifle's scope, the faint crosshairs resting on the target's chest. The machine stopped suddenly, turning its head as if it sensed her gaze. Mara exhaled. The trigger broke beneath her finger. The sound was pure thunder. The bullet sliced through the blizzard, a comet of brass and fire, and struck the Cytherian commander dead center. The explosion that followed was enormous, a ripple of red and white that sent shockwaves through the snowfield. For the first time, the horde faltered. Their formation broke. Direct hit, Elias confirmed. Enemy coordination disrupted. Transmission signal reduced by 70%. Mara lowered the rifle, staring at the burning wreck in the distance. The victory felt hollow, fragile, like a candle flickering in a collapsing room. Elias, she said, her voice rough. How long until the generator reaches full charge? 72 minutes. She swallowed hard. And the enemy? Reformation underway. They will resume assault in approximately 9 minutes. She closed her eyes, letting the cold seep deeper into her skin. There would be no rest, not even after this small triumph. But for the first time, something inside her shifted, a spark that had been buried under layers of exhaustion and frost. Elias, she said quietly, do you believe in miracles? I'm not programmed for belief, the AI replied. Then start learning. She lifted the rifle again, staring into the storm where the enemy began to stir once more. The red lights reignited, one by one, spreading like fire through the valley. The pulse beneath the ice beat faster, the hum of humanity's last hope. Mara set her sights on the next wave and whispered into the wind. We're not done yet. The storm answered with silence, and the world held its breath. The silence after the explosion was worse than the noise. It pressed in from every side, heavy and absolute, as though the world itself had paused to witness what came next. Mara crouched low, the Barrett cooling beside her, the last trace of gunpowder still sharp in the air. Smoke coiled upward from the burning wreck of the Cytherian commander, a dark smear against the endless white. Her body trembled with exhaustion and cold, but she forced herself to stay alert. The shot had bought her time, not victory. Elias, she said into the comms, voice hoarse. Status report. Enemy forces have been disrupted, but not neutralized, the AI replied. 61 active signatures remaining. Generator charge at 87%. Core stability declining. How long until it's ready? Approximately 22 minutes. She exhaled slowly. 22 minutes. It might as well have been 22 years. The Cytherians would regroup long before then, and she had nothing left to hold them back. Her ammo was gone. Her strength nearly so. But retreat wasn't an option. Not while the generator still pulsed below the ice like the last heartbeat of the species she was sworn to protect. Snow whipped across the ridge, biting into her exposed skin. She dragged herself back to Jin's position. He was awake now, sitting upright against the rock, his face pale beneath the frost. Blood had dried along his temple, and his right arm hung uselessly at his side. "You're still breathing," she said. "Barely." His smile was faint, brittle. "Heard that explosion. Guess you found their boss." "He's gone," she said. "But the rest are coming." Jin's eyes flicked toward the horizon, where the storm thickened once more. "Then this is it. This is it," she agreed. They sat together in silence for a moment, the storm's roar filling the space between them. There was no need for pretense now. The truth was simple and brutal. They were out of time, out of weapons, out of everything except purpose. Jin turned his head toward her. "Do you ever think about what comes after?" She frowned. "After what? After all this? After we're gone? If the EMP works, what happens then? Do people rebuild? Or is it just more silence?" Mara didn't answer right away. She looked down at the Barrett, her reflection faint in its frozen metal. "I don't know," she said finally, "but silence is better than extinction." He nodded, accepting that as enough. Elias's voice returned, steady and emotionless. "Lieutenant Vance, I detect renewed enemy movement. Estimated contact in 6 minutes. Recommend immediate relocation to generator control point for manual activation." "Manual activation?" she asked sharply. "I thought it was automated. System integrity compromised by prior damage. Automated discharge will fail. A manual trigger is required to ensure successful pulse." Her stomach sank, meaning someone has to be there when it fires. Affirmative. She met Jin's gaze. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. "No," he said firmly. "You're not doing that." "I have to," she replied. "You're in no condition to move, and someone needs to guard the ridge until it's ready. If they breach before it fires, all of this, everything, is for nothing. You're talking about suicide. I'm talking about finishing what we started." Jin reached for her hand, his grip weak but urgent. "Mara, don't let them take you down there. They'll surround it. You'll be trapped." She squeezed his hand once, then released it. "They won't take me. They'll never get that close." He stared at her, jaw tight, then gave a single sharp nod. "Then make it count." She rose, shouldering the rifle, though she knew it was little more than symbolic now. The weight of it grounded her. As she began her descent toward the generator caverns, the wind howled louder, carrying with it the metallic echo of the advancing horde. She didn't look back. The entrance to the cavern glowed faintly from the reactor's inner light. Frost coated the walls, shimmering like glass. The air inside was warmer, vibrating with energy that made her skin prickle. The generator sat in the center of the chamber, a towering column of metal and light, humming with unstable power. Sparks arced along its coils, casting fleeting shadows across the ice. "Elias," she said, stepping closer. "Talk to me." "Core stability at 64%, the AI replied. "Recommend immediate sequence initiation." "What happens when the pulse fires?" "All Cytherian units within planetary range will be disabled permanently. Secondary effects on biological systems, negligible. Operator survival probability, less than 2%. She allowed herself a dry laugh. "Better odds than you gave me earlier. Would you like me to record a final statement for historical archives?" "No," she said. "There's no one left to hear it." "Correction," Elias said. "There is me." Mara hesitated, then smiled faintly. "All right then, record this. Humanity isn't numbers or machines or power grids. It's the part of us that keeps standing up even when there's nothing left to stand for. Make sure you remember that." Statement archived. The ground trembled. Distant thunder rolled through the cavern as explosions erupted somewhere above. The Cytherians had reached the ridge. "Mara," Jin's voice crackled through the comms, faint and broken. "They're here. I can hold them for a bit, but you need to fire that thing now." "I'm almost there," she said. "Just do it," he rasped. "Don't wait." Static swallowed his voice. She clenched her jaw and turned toward the control panel. Her gloves shook as she entered the activation sequence. Warning lights flared red, alarms echoing through the chamber. The hum grew louder, vibrating through her bones. The comm unit buzzed again, Elias this time. Lieutenant Vance, Cytherians approaching generator entrance. 30 seconds to contact. She gripped the manual override lever and looked up at the ceiling of ice, imagining the war raging just beyond it. She thought of Jean holding the ridge with what little strength remained. She thought of her brother, of every soldier who'd stood their ground when surrender would have been easier. The door to the cavern burst open with a metallic scream. The first Cytherian stepped through, its red eyes scanning, its body wreathed in frost and smoke. More followed. Mara raised the Barrett, though she knew the chamber was empty. The gesture was instinct, defiance. Elias, she said quietly. How long until full charge? 10 seconds. The Cytherians advanced, weapons glowing. She stood between them and the generator, her breath visible in the pulsing light. 9. Her hand found the lever. 8. One of the machines raised its rifle. 7. Jin's voice came through the static, faint and trembling. Finish it, Mara. 6. The rifle fired, searing plasma cutting through her shoulder. She barely felt it. 5. Her vision dimmed. 4. She forced her hand down on the lever. 3. Light consumed everything. The EMP pulse detonated, a shockwave of pure white radiance bursting outward from the generator. The Cytherians froze mid-step, their bodies shuddering before collapsing, lifeless, into the snow. The light spread beyond the cavern, racing across the frozen horizon, silencing every machine it touched. The world went still. When the brightness faded, Mara was on her knees beside the control panel, the Barrett resting against her leg. Her skin was pale, her breath shallow. She looked toward the tunnel where the storm's light spilled faintly through. Elias, she whispered. I am here, the AI replied, its tone softer now, almost human. Did it work? Yes. The Cytherians are gone. She smiled faintly. Then that's enough. Her hand slipped from the lever, falling limp at her side. The pulse of the generator dimmed, settling into silence. Snow drifted gently through the cracked ceiling, glowing faintly in the dying light. Above, the wind had quieted. The world was hushed again, but it was a different kind of silence, one born not from fear but from peace. Jin's broken voice came faintly through the comms, barely more than a whisper. She did it. She actually did it. The AI's sensors recorded the last human signals, then turned its attention toward the horizon, where the first rays of dawn crept over the ice. Humanity endures, Elias said softly to no one. The light spread, slow and golden, washing over the snow where metal and flesh had fallen together. And far below the surface, beside the silent Barrett rifle, Mara Vance rested at last, her expression calm, as though she were listening to the wind.